little brief Oh,
Sorry.
it's okay. A
You
little
go.
brief agenda for today. So, what are invisible disabilities and why they're important? Some common types, as well as challenges faced by these individuals, how to support everyone better, and some practical accommodations for how to create this inclusive environment. I would like to note there was also a presentation done a couple of weeks ago that was recorded around accessible workplaces. So this is also a good one to review if you have an opportunity. There's a little bit of overlap between the two, so feel free to check out that presentation as well. All right, so what are invisible disabilities? So these are going to refer to physical, mental, or neurological conditions that aren't immediately visible by the population. And we're going to go into more detail around what some of these examples include, but they can have a significant impact on how we perform in our daily life and our workplace performance and also in leisure activity. And because they're invisible, sometimes this can lead to a mass misunderstanding and a lack of support in the workplace. So this presentation is geared at how can we help to support those individuals a little bit better. So why is it important to do this? Well, many people that are living with invisible disabilities are already facing tremendous amounts of stigma and judgment. And without an awareness and understanding of these, they might not be receiving the support and accommodations that they need. And there's lots of things that can be put in place to ensure that they're well supported in their environment. Inclusive environments will certainly help to lead to a better morale and productivity and a more supportive work environment for everyone. And certainly in building this understanding, it helps to foster a culture of empathy and inclusion within the workplace. Probably many of you are aware that in 2017, Nova Scotia passed the Act respecting accessibility in Nova Scotia. So the premise behind this is by 2030 that we'll have accessible and inclusive and barrier-free by 2030. Certainly there's a long way to come, but it's a step in the right direction. And within this, there's 6 accessibility standards that are currently being developed. So talking a little bit more and giving a bit more understanding around these invisible disabilities, and certainly this is not an exhaustive list. There are many here that are not mentioned, but these are just a few, just to kind of give you an idea of what some of these might look like. So from mental health, it can be anxiety, depression, PTSD. There can be complex issues as well, stress-induced, and other mental health conditions not noted. Chronic illnesses such as fibromyalgia, diabetes, chronic fatigue, post-concussion syndrome, as well as any sort of traumatic brain injury. And then we look at neurological conditions, so epilepsy, ADD and ADHD, autism spectrum disorder, and other neuro conditions as well. And then sensory impairments, so hearing loss, visual impairments, and any other sensory pieces as well. So we're going to take these and break them down a little bit and then talk about how can we make our work environments more accessible with these. I just love this quote. We need to make every single thing accessible to every single person with a disability. And this is Stevie Wonder. So before getting into how we do this, I think it's important to look at what are some of the challenges that are faced. And a lot of time, what happens is there's really a lack of understanding by peers and employers of how can we support these individuals. And sometimes it's that if there are limitations, they're not being communicated. But a lot of times it's employers not really having an understanding of how they can help. So there's also a limited access to accommodations and resource, especially if people aren't reaching out for that support. And I think there's a lot of fear that comes from individuals in reaching out for that support, because sometimes there's this need to prove your disability, or that there might be judgment based on an appearance or physical abilities. And so that prevents a lot of people from really feeling like they can communicate what some of those pieces are. So, how do we support these individuals? Well, first, it's really important to go in and typically, what I'll do is I'll go into a workplace and I'll conduct an inclusion audit. So, this is going to look at what are the barriers that are in place, any biases, areas needing improvement. And the first thing I do is actually look at the physical environment. And then what I like to do is I do surveys that are anonymous so people can feel like they have the ability to really talk about some of the issues that they're facing without having identifiers as part of that. Having focus groups, there's lots of people that have lots to say around what would be supportive for them in the workplace. And certainly, we're going to go through what some tips are for those pieces. And then looking at consultations to gather more feedback, and certainly focus groups and kind of one-on-one meeting with employees is really important, and it's a way that we can really ensure that these people are feeling like they're really being supported. Building awareness and education is probably, in my opinion, one of the most important things because the more education that is offered, the more that we're able to support these individuals. So, looking at offering training, some workshops around diversity, invisible disability, inclusion topics are really essential. And as part of those, there can also be those focus groups as well. There's lots of online free learning opportunities and workshops, even like today, that can be offered to really help, especially with management around how can we support these individuals, and how can we foster ongoing learning to ensure that there's open communication and really a shared understanding of those pieces. Fostering leadership, so really making sure that there's actions and policies and communication. I think it's what often happens is there's things that are put into place, but whether or not they're ongoing and that support feels like it's continuing. I think it's one thing to have a policy, but are those policies actually being carried out? And really taking a step back to hold leadership accountable for how we're promoting that equity and demonstrating those inclusive behaviors. So, going in and doing those audits, but then coming back in 6 months or a year to look at, have changes been made, what can be shifted, and certainly, as whether it's new information is coming out or new supports, there's always new type of accessibility features that change. Even this year there's been more that we look at, so it's important to revisit it and re-examine what can we do to make these spaces accessible. So, to ensure accessibility for all, we want to make sure that spaces, both physical and virtual, and we'll talk about both of those areas specifically, that they're accessible to everyone. So there's lots of tools such as assistive technology, closed captioning, flexible workspaces, universal design, and so on. And we're going to break those down a little bit into further detail. Um, Making sure that we're recruiting and retaining individuals from diverse backgrounds, and supporting initiatives that are going to help to create opportunities for underrepresented groups to really succeed in the workplace. And then we want to look at our inclusive policies and system and make sure that they're being updated frequently. I think they should be reviewed at least once a year, not only to be updated, but to make sure, as I mentioned before, that they're being followed and that we're ensuring that there's fairness and equal opportunities. There's no toleration for discrimination, and that we're really integrating that inclusive language and flexible systems to help everyone in these places. Creating safe spaces for open communication. I think it's really important. A lot of people feel like they want to speak up or they want to talk to management, but there's a bit of fear associated with that. And so, oftentimes, what I recommend is that it is, like whether it's a survey monkey that's anonymous or something, so that that input can be shared, but it doesn't come back to that specific person. That being said, we really want to address that the more that we talk about this, the more support can be put into place. And oftentimes what I'm seeing in workplaces is the more that people are stepping up to talk about it, the more that other people feel comfortable talking about maybe some challenges that they're facing. And in doing that, it obviously creates inclusion, but there could be a strategy that's working really well for one employee that could be shared with another that could help everybody out. So really making sure that we're sharing tools and we're sharing strategies that are helpful, to make sure that it's helpful for everyone. And then celebrating diversity, and this really helps to foster belonging. So, doing some inclusive team building activities that really embrace those shared experiences and respect our individual differences. Encouraging that collaboration. So whether it's kind of teamwork activities, having meetings and projects, making sure that those environments allow people to share. And sometimes I think what we can find is that if those environments, whether it's team activities, sometimes they can be really daunting because it can be sensory overload. There might be too many people or too much talking, or the lighting can be impacted, and all those pieces. So sometimes doing smaller breakout groups can be more supportive. Sometimes for individuals, it's actually more supportive to do one-on-one. So reaching out and asking your team what feels best. Do you want to meet as a team to have these discussions, or do we want to meet one-on-one? And really making sure that it's more individualized for what works well with each person. There's going to be more, like whether it's people that are extroverted or introverted, really helping to support whatever feels best for those individuals as well. And then setting some goals. So going back to our list of, okay, this is what we need to do to ensure that we're having an inclusive environment. How are we actually obtaining those goals? Are we meeting our check-ins throughout the year? And how are we monitoring them? Are we doing surveys? Are we looking at key performance indicators or KPIs? Lots of methods that we can do that, but I think having that audit done and then going in and checking it is really, really essential. And then continuously assessing and adapting as required. This can happen at least once a year. And as new things come, making sure that people feel like they can come to management or other colleagues to say, this is a thing that I've just recently heard about, or this is a strategy, or maybe it's a app extension on our computers that can help us feel um, more accessible as well. So some practical accommodations, and we'll get into some more as well, but offering flexible work hours and remote options. So, making sure that people are able to attend medical appointments, and in that offering a little bit of flexibility in our hours is a really great start. Ensuring that our accessibility is up to date, and that can be in our physical and digital spaces. And we'll go through some different apps for those pieces as well. Making sure that we're utilizing employee assistance programs, which, there's mental health support. There's a lot of different support on that, and lots of education through employee assistance as well. And then, utilizing, if you have your extended health benefits, utilizing your mental health, occupational therapy, all of those pieces to make sure a lot of you have coverage for workplace accommodations, or could be coming in and doing an ergonomic assessment or a workplace assessment to see what sort of support can we put in your direct space, so that we can ensure that you're having a more supportive work environment. And sometimes it's things that we haven't even thought about that can be the most supportive. So here are some examples of assistive technology. Certainly navigating the internet without sight or hearing or hands can be a challenge. So there's lots of suggestions here, and certainly I can send out in the upcoming slides. There's some more detailed actual sites. I'm happy to send those out in an email to Roxanne, and she can forward them as well. Screen readers are really beneficial to help people hear content on a website if there's kind of low vision that is happening. Lots of websites allow us to use without a mouse in case there's limited mobility in joints. Making sure that there's closed captioning and transcripts available. Benefit of doing Zoom is that, these meetings can be recorded, and they can be, a transcript can be downloaded so that people can go back and read if needed. And then having a download available so that you can read out information as well can be very helpful. I'm not going to go through all of these individually because there's many of them, but there's lots of screen readers that are really, really beneficial to be utilized, and and a lot of these can help, whether it's speech and braille output. You can use screen magnification, and there's also apps such as Flux Filter, where if you have a concussion, it can decrease the blue light that's coming through on your screen so that it kind of can decrease both some of the headache and migraine symptoms that come from having blue light all of the time. Um, and it's a free add-on to all of our computers, that I would highly recommend. Utilizing AI that can narrate things for you as well, and really like using the features on a lot of these programs to their full abilities. Hearing impairments, so using closed captioning, Google Meet. I'm not sure. I'm assuming Zoom is one of the pieces that you guys use, as well as Microsoft Teams. Google Meet offers live captioning as well. Um, Looking at some Bluetooth hearing devices as well. Um, really making sure that if we're in big environments, that there's FM systems. Um, for bigger presentations or those education pieces, having someone there that can be utilizing sign language can be really helpful. Having visual alert systems in place, and vibration, all of those type of technology can be really helpful for those dealing with hearing impairments as well. There's voice control devices. There's obviously numerous options available that can help utilize voice commands. Lots of Windows and Apple Siri controlling devices that allow for hands-free options, and looking at a little bit more detailed into accessible office layouts. So with office layouts, it's utilizing ergonomic assessments that you have coverage for, ensuring that there's lots of space in your workplace, utilizing technology like hands-free devices, Bluetooth. There's Dragon Speak if you're unable to type, making sure that there's ergonomic equipment that can help with chronic pain and other physical impairments as well. Lots of apps that are utilized to help with reading and writing. So Grammarly is a really common tool that a lot of people utilize, and this can help with grammar and spell check. If people have specific learning disabilities, it can be really helpful in those pieces. Anything that kind of allows that proofreading and grammar check is really helpful. For those that are dealing with ADHD and maybe some of the cognitive impairment, utilizing memory aids can be really helpful. So things that allow us to have active memory reminders, and utilizing your benefits. So, whether it's working with an OT or other professionals to help you with some strategies around, how can I have better divided attention or sustained attention or memory? So, looking at all those aspects of cognitive functioning, and how can we utilize some of these tools to help us function better in the workplace. A lot of people struggle a lot with executive functioning. It seems to be a thing that I've dealt with a lot in workplaces. And there's lots of apps that really help with that. So whether it's prioritization of tasks, or looking at a task and breaking it down into smaller pieces so it's not as daunting. So utilizing apps like Motion that really help to prioritize your day and allocate different windows of time for different activities. And those tend to be, in my opinion, some of the best programs that exist out there. most people find them very beneficial. And for example, if you don't finish a task, it will move it to your next available space that you have. So really utilizing that assistive technology when able can really help to decrease some of the stress and anxiety that we feel when we feel overwhelmed at work by a lot of the demands that are on us. Utilizing alternative formats such as Braille, large print, audio recordings, lots of communication accessibility, utilizing interpreters certainly for big meetings and important communications can be really, really important. And I know that for your bigger conferences, I noticed that they were available for that, so that's really great. Anytime that there's learning opportunities, it's really great to have that as an option as well as closed captioning available. These are some physical workplace accessibility features. Certainly, there's an exhaustive list in the other presentation that I had mentioned, but those dealing with chronic pain and fibromyalgia and other physical disabilities, it's really important to look at the physical work environment. So how are we accessing our building entry and exit? Are doorways wide enough? Do we have ramps with gentle slopes? Are there elevators so that we can accommodate not only those with wheelchairs, but also those that struggle with stairs? Using automatic doors, as I'm sure many of you are aware, there's lots of places that doors are really heavy, and that can pose as a pretty significant barrier to entry and exit of a building. And then we look at the interior layout and how we're navigating. So making sure that our hallways are wide enough, that there's lots of clear pathways so that there's not a bunch of obstacles in place. And obstacles not only are a barrier if you have a walker or wheelchair, a cane, but they can also feel very daunting and sort of can be sensory overload if we have too much in our path. And that can come back to the visual impairment as well. Making sure if there is furniture, that there's lots of space around for movement, that there's lots of accessibility signs throughout, and adequate lighting. I think lighting is a big piece that I've noticed in a lot of the workplaces that I've been going into. And I think, I'm sure depending on the buildings that you're in, is certainly maybe not as much of a barrier if you're working from home, but fluorescent lighting can pose as a pretty significant um, increase in our anxiety and headaches and those type of symptoms. So really making sure that the lighting is adequate and that we're not utilizing too much fluorescent lighting. So these can be swapped out for more of a warm lighting. You can also put filters over these fluorescent lights, which is a little bit of a cheaper option than swapping the bulbs. But certainly there's something that I notice in a lot of the workplaces and something I feel like probably needs to be attended to a little bit more frequently than it is. If you are in a space that has a lot of fluorescent lighting and you don't have control over that, so let's say you're in a big space with shared stalls, like having a lamp, those type of things, making sure that you don't have screen glare on your computer can be really helpful. That glare can cause a lot of the headache symptoms as well. Um, Again, like with an ergonomic assessment, this can help look at, is my desk adjustable? Having the opportunity to have sit and stand option, making sure that your chair is set up for your needs. And this can really help to not only decrease ongoing pain, but prevent. And I think in a lot of workplaces, we don't necessarily think about prevention. If we're not experiencing any pain, then why do I need to do anything? The problem is that if we sit in a position that's not proper for us over time, this can lead to a lot of strain and then ongoing issues. So, making sure that your chair has adjustable height and that there's lumbar support, that we can kind of remove armrests if they're not being utilized, that the seat height is at the appropriate height, your screen is at the appropriate height, and all of those pieces. So ergonomic assessments, they're covered by your extended health. It's really important to do that and to get those things put into place for prevention and to ensure that you don't have further injuries in the workplace. And then looking at these flexible work areas, and we'll talk about how can we, make these additional spaces and accommodations. We're going to talk a little bit about like creating a calming workplace space that you can go to as needed. Looking at restrooms and facilities. So, making sure that in these restrooms there's grab bars, lower sinks, and mirrors, making sure that there's enough space in the toilet stalls. One thing that I've noticed in a lot of the bigger buildings is that some of the places are set up that they have lights that time out after a certain period of time. And this can be not so great if you're in the bathroom and the lights go out on you. So making sure that those timed lights are turned off, it's one of the first things I usually look at because it can lead to potential falls in the bathroom spaces as well. So while they save a little bit of electricity, they certainly can cause more accidents. We want to look at break rooms, making sure that there's accessible seating in those and that the counter heights are appropriate. And really making sure that we have designated accessible parking spaces that are close to the building that have clear signages. I think a lot of people are not necessarily aware that you can have a wheelchair designated parking piece put in your vehicle with invisible disabilities. And so going to your physician and requesting that is something that I often recommend. That way you're closer, especially for those that, have chronic pain issues and where walking long distances can be quite challenging. So making sure that you have that in your vehicle and that you have access to that accessible parking. We talked a little bit about flexible work arrangements, the opportunity to work from home as needed, really making sure that when we're hiring that there's non-discriminatory job posting and that there's an accessible application process. This is something a lot of people don't think about, but there should be multiple ways that individuals can apply and also offering some assistance if required for that application process to making sure that it's inclusive for everyone. And then we've talked a little bit about the ongoing training, but making sure that that's offered to everyone and that it's part of onboarding as well. So making sure that when we have new hires, making sure that they're aware of these are the accessibility features of the place, and this is where you can go if you need to decrease any overstimulation that you're experiencing and what that office and workplace has to offer. This is kind of your implementation checklist. So coming in, doing the audit, developing a plan, engaging experts, having a budget, monitoring, and then continuous improvement. So we've talked about these stages, but I usually recommend that this is done at least once a year, and really that everyone's part of this, and that it isn't just management or just your certain people, that everyone's included, because we really want to make sure that everyone is having an opportunity to be part of this piece, so that everyone feels included and that we don't miss anything. I think one of the things that we really want to create, if possible, is some sort of wellness space within a work environment. This can be a room, it can be, like a bigger space where people have a space that they can go to decompress, whether this is on their breaks, at lunchtime, a place that ideally addresses all the sensory considerations. So, making sure that there's not strong odors, that there's not harsh lighting, that there's not excessive noise. I always make sure that these places it's a no talking space. Sometimes you can have kind of a small spa music or low music with low stimulation that doesn't have any talking in it. Lots of dim lighting, opportunity to adjust the temperature as needed, and really making sure that this space is welcoming for everyone. Um, Using soundproofing materials, so these can be easily purchased on Amazon and other places, but having the soundproofing material around the room so that if others are working and it's a shared workspace, that it's kind of a quieter space for people to be in. Sometimes you can put a white noise machine that can kind of block out some of the background noise, or just a soft background. Um, Music, using calming aesthetics, so really using natural colors, not like bright white lights or bright white colors on the wall. So really natural warm colors, having plants and soft lightings, and a minimalist decor. So you don't want to overwhelm your visual senses. So anything you can do to kind of reduce that will help to ease any stress that we're feeling. And then having really comfortable seating options with like various levels of different seating arrangements. So beanbag chairs and ergonomic seats and recliners. So if you need a physical rest or a space to decompress, that you have that. Often I have like a little sensory toolkit. So, having weighted blankets or a lap pad, some shoulder weight, offering noise canceling headphones. These can be Bluetooth, or they can just be noise canceling completely. So there's no sound that's coming in. Especially in work environments that are quite noisy, it's nice to have the opportunity to have these noise canceling headphones, and certainly these can be utilized even in your workspace. Offering fidget tools, so having a little basket of like textured objects and fidgets and things that aren't too noisy, but that can help those with any sort of sensory processing disorder, ADHD, those type of pieces as well. And then flexibility to utilize these spaces. And then there's lots of free resources like guided meditation, mindfulness apps. So often providing a list. So I'll often recommend, okay, here's some suggested resources, and I'll print it out and laminate it and put it in that space. You can also have prompts for deep breathing and relaxation. So here's how you do a box breathing exercise. Here's how you do some diaphragmatic breathing, and have both written and visual prompts available for those pieces. You can have a tablet in the space that people can work through with the headphones. So lots of different options there of ways of calming our central nervous system down. And then calming imagery is helpful. So, whether you have some plants up, or, something that's kind of calming, you can have it on a tablet or on a screen. That can be really helpful. And then making sure that this is a confidential place and that it's quiet and there's no talking. This is really a place where all your employees can go to feel really safe and decompress. Um, I think we've kind of talked about some of these. Offering yoga mats is really helpful as well. A space where people can go in and stretch and really like move their body as needed in a quiet way. But you can offer, have some suggested stretches up on the wall. I've also had in certain workplaces, people can take like kind of a community stretch break that can be really helpful. I think if we do it as a collaborative effort, we can help to promote everyone to take their breaks. It's, when we get busy, we often forget to take those scheduled break, and it's really, really important for our mental and physical health to take those breaks. So, maybe offering a 15-minute stretch where all those that might want to partake can be, putting it into the schedule so that everyone takes it at the same time. And if people are unable to attend it, making sure that there's opportunities in a space where you can do that stretching. Um, so just some additional notes here, really making sure that everything is individualized. And so whether this is through meeting individually with someone as they're hired, or as part of even your yearly or bi-yearly check-in, see if there's any additional things that can be put in place to ensure that their needs are being met. Making sure that employees feel like they're safe in requesting excuse me, their accommodations without that fear or stigma. And I think the more that we talk about it and that we reach out to our employees, the safer that they'll feel in requesting it. And I think if they feel like they have to come to you, it can feel a little bit more daunting versus if we're reaching out and saying, is there anything that we can do or anything we can put into place to help? It's certainly going to help to reduce that stigma that can occur. And then making sure that it feels like their confidentiality is being met with these accommodations. Certainly, we don't have to disclose any physical or mental health pieces to our employer, but sometimes, in order for them to support us best, providing those in a confidential way can really help. And certainly, if we don't express what some of those needs are, then they can't be put in place. So really making sure that they have a place to do that. So, just a brief summary. We really want to make sure that we create a culture of understanding. Recognizing invisible disabilities is really essential for making sure that there's inclusivity within the workplace. Making sure that we have appropriate support and accommodations to help people feel empowered and so that they can succeed with work. We really want to foster awareness, whether it's through education or accessible screens and audits to make sure that our workplaces are stronger and that our community feels stronger as well. And then take those steps towards understanding really helps to make a big difference. I think another piece too that I didn't mention is certainly checking in, with your manager or having them check in with you, but also checking in with our colleagues. I think it's a thing that we often forget that, sometimes we notice even subtle differences, if our colleagues are feeling a bit off. I think we sometimes need to be cautious because we don't want to bring too much attention. But I think, coming to a place of, is there anything I can do to support you? Or is there anything that would make the workplace feel better? If we see people struggling is a way that can also help you feel a little bit more part of a community as well. So this is my contact information. Feel free to reach out if you have any specific questions, if there's anything that I can do to support you in your workplace, whether it's ergonomic assessments or coming in and looking at those audits and trying to help make your workspace feel more inclusive to everyone. Also, feel free to take a peek at the previous presentation that was done a couple of weeks ago or last month around creating accessible workplaces. And yeah, my number and contact is here if there's any questions that you have. And I'll come back to the chat so we can see if there's any questions in that piece. Just going to see if there's anything in the chat. I don't see anything. Does anyone have any questions at all? I'm going to put my email address and phone number in the chat in case anyone has any follow-up questions. Thanks, Lauren. All right. If there's no further questions, again, feel free to reach out if there's anything else that's needed. And thank you so much to everyone that attended today. Thanks, everyone.